Okay, hello and welcome to episode 3 of the Audacity Factor podcast. My name is Kathryn. I am your host, founder of Audacity Coaching and Strategies, and I'm here to bring you all things courageous, all things audacious, and all things challenging as well. I think without challenge, our lives can really kind of founder and get stuck. And we don't really want that to happen, do we? Because so many of us, including myself, know what that feels like. And I know for me, that was a place that I felt mired in for years. So there's one subject that I have been meaning to touch on, and I know this is going to be challenging, but I love a good challenge. I don't know about y'all, but I'm bringing it here on the Audacity Factor podcast. So the subject we're going to talk about, and I'm going to challenge you with today, is that idea of closure and needing closure. I have no idea where that stems from or who brought that into being a thing, needing closure, because really it's an elusive kind of illusionary thing. We think it's something real when it's absolutely not. And from my own experience, I know that as a victim of emotional abuse, narcissism, gaslighting, and sexual abuse, it can be those of us who are suffering from maybe PTSD or complex PTSD or whatever the thing is, trying to heal and recover from our past traumas, abuses, experiences, whatever they are, can feel like we need closure. And typically it's from that other, let's say, person that was the quote unquote perpetrator of our abuse, our trauma. Now, if you just think about that, we are attempting to continue to need or want something from someone that we know for a fact is not there to help us, support us, love us, anything. So how can it be that we're continuing to look to that person? It could be a boss, it could be a romantic partner, it could be a family member needing closure so we can kind of close that chapter, but on their terms. Like, what the heck is that? I want to know what your thoughts are on this. I know this is a challenging subject and I may be rubbing some people the wrong way. However, I know I'm not afraid of that because I'm not afraid to ask myself the challenging questions. Like, what the heck was my part in allowing trauma? What the heck was my part in maybe being the perpetrator of someone else's trauma? So this whole idea around closure, my daughter and I had a conversation about this very thing. It's that feeling like you have to get maybe the last word, or you need to continue to explain, or you need to continue to justify or point the finger or blame at this other person, this other entity, whatever it may be, looking to have some kind of resolution. Well, again, that's just really more on the line of a fantasy than anything else. The only time that we can actually move on from a chapter is if we literally move on. Take the steps out of the past, stop being stuck and mired in the experience or the feelings of it, and take a step forward away from that. Not believing that you need this one piece from someone or somewhere else so that you can do that. That you need somebody else to close the door instead of you closing the door yourself and walking away. Because that's really what it comes down to. It's part of your responsibility to detach from believing that you need this thing called closure as some form of a release or some form of a resolution. I think is really more what it kind of feels like. I don't know where this whole idea came from. And maybe, I'm sure it was probably well-intentioned, but now it's become this thing that people hold up, especially traumatized people hold up as this thing that they need before they can do the work that they need to do to move on from whatever their experience was. And it could have been horrific. I know mine was. It was a decade spent in abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse. And me, literally, I had to, and I'll admit this to you all right now, I had to block, and I've probably said this before, block myself from contact, thinking I needed to say one more thing, thinking I needed to do one more thing, or it was just one more thing, and then I would be able to let it go. It became a practice for me to practice detaching, to practice not allowing myself to indulge in that need or desire for completion, for resolution, for one last jab, or whatever it was, to feeling like it would release me from the pain of what I was coping with. And it's just not true. Closure is not a thing. Now, there may be times in your life where you and someone else are able to come to some type of a resolution. But that's the rarity for sure, because so much of it you feel is based in your need for something. And that need comes with a level of participation from the other person. And as long as we hold on to that, we will remain mired in the past. The only thing that does is keep us anchored to that. Wouldn't you rather dissolve the attachment and recognize that you actually don't need that? What you actually want is to feel better. But the feeling better is in your hands, not in anyone else's. It can't come from your need or your belief that you have this need for it to come from somewhere else, from someone else. This became such a frustrating topic for me, and a lot of it came from my own experience, but then also helping others through their own messiness and their own belief that this is something that was hindering them because they felt they needed closure. They felt they needed to have one last conversation. And this was kind of, the conversation my daughter and I were having the other day. She learned this the hard way, feeling like she needed one last conversation before she could release a relationship. Feeling like she had to do one more level of explaining, one more piece of engagement. It's like those forever text messages that you just can't stop. You can't seem to stop yourself from engaging in. One of my strongest beliefs is that when you are done with it, it is done with you. And as you've heard me say, you can breathe life into your past. You can breathe life into your trauma. Continue to poke at that bruise to make sure it still hurts. Well, it's going to stay a bruise if you continue to poke at it. It's going to continue to hurt the more you poke at it. So how about breathing life into what you want, the life you want to have? And a big part of that is allowing yourself and taking the responsibility for your healing process. You have to take 100% responsibility for that. 100% responsibility for your life, for the state of your life at this very moment, because the past has already happened. You can't change any of it. You can't, continuing to try to punish someone else is just keeping yourself chained to them. What is it that you need from yourself to have this feeling that you believe you need of resolution? Because oftentimes, and probably more often than not, the resolution doesn't come. So then what do? You have to be able to create that scenario for yourself. Release yourself from this idea of closure. Release yourself from this need for some type of resolution, some level of understanding, some level of compassion, some level of empathy, anything, some level of the other person taking any responsibility for what happened or what happened to you. Because the majority of the time, that is not going to happen. So now, how can you, instead of believing that you need this one piece, it's kind of like when you buy a new puzzle and there's one piece missing. It's on the floor somewhere or something, but maybe it's just missing. So when comes the time that you just say, okay, you know what? This puzzle's missing a piece. That's all there is to it. I'm going to take it apart, put it back in the box, and put it in the yard sale or take it to the Goodwill because I know the piece is missing, but I'm no longer going to hold on to it. I know for myself, I could bury myself in the frustration of that, a feeling that I just desperately wanted this one piece, and finally had to stop breathing into feeling like I needed that, stop breathing into that belief, and change my thinking about, I'm giving the meaning to this idea of closure. And because everybody's talking about it, it becomes an actual, you believe, a thing. Well, how about let's unmake it a thing, something that you don't actually need, something you don't actually want. Because I think so many of us know that one time that we went back to get this thing ended up in us going back to that scenario for another cycle of the trauma that we had to then pop ourselves out the other end again. So how many times will you actually allow yourself to run that cycle before you give up this idea of needing closure and needing resolution and just saying, peace out. I'm out of here. You can be over there doing your thing. I'm going to breathe life into what I want. I'm going to take responsibility for my healing process. And that means not having you anywhere in my world at all, anywhere in my vicinity, anywhere in any of my orbits. We can be the bold explorer of what comes next for us and how we actually go about that. But I challenge you today to release this notion, this belief, this idea that there's such a thing as closure, because there's not. That's just something one more thing that we've been encouraged to believe that we need, or that's actually a thing. And I'd love for you to challenge yourself if that's a belief that you have, because it's a limiting belief. What is an expansive belief that you can have instead? It can be, I am in complete control of my healing process. I am in complete control of what comes next for me. I'm in complete control of closing that door and never opening it again, and literally letting it disappear. Because that's what happens. As you move forward in your life, as you take the steps through your healing process to the other side, that past dissipates when we allow it to. And isn't that what you want to feel? instead. A release of the pain, a release of the anxiety, a release of all the side effects that show up in your body, show up in your behavior, show up in how you feel about yourself. Isn't that what you actually want? A release from that. Well, you get to create that starting today, starting right now. You can make a new choice. And I encourage you and challenge you to make a choice for yourself, to choose you in this moment and get rid of that idea or belief around the thing about closure, needing or wanting closure, because you don't need it. You don't have to have it. So be brave, be courageous, be audacious today so that you can start living the life that you actually want. All right, that's going to be it for me on episode 3 of the Audacity Factor podcast. I will see you all next week with some more challenging info.